This week on Forward.
Do you think the people who serve your community deserve an opportunity to live there? Right? Do the teachers, firefighters, service workers who are ultimately part of the ecosystem that serves you, do they at least deserve, I wouldn't even say a right, but do they deserve an opportunity to live in your community? If we want to talk about what America can and should be, that's fulfilling those opportunities is a big part of it. But people have been renting rooms for centuries. Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, I think the New York Times called pad split the new old solution to the affordable housing problem. It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast the founder and CEO of an awesome company, Pad Split, Atticus LeBlanc. Welcome, Atticus.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Pad Split is a company that I encountered relatively recently, but when I saw it, I thought, holy crap, this is a company that's actually trying to address one of the worst problems in America today, which is a lack of housing that people can afford and enjoy living in. And so I thought, geez, man, I can't believe you're trying to tackle this. And people that listen to my podcast, there are authors, there are thinkers, there are political figures sometimes. And we do have entrepreneurs on, generally, if they're tackling a problem that matters, honestly, or they have a company that's like doing something really positive and wholesome. So how did you wind up taking aim at what you'd call the affordable housing problem in America?
Sure. It's a great question, and it's a pretty long journey. I think I've been in the business for a long time, affordable housing specifically. I've been an entrepreneur in the housing space for almost 20 years now. And I just got more and more frustrated the more time that I was engaged with the lack of practical solutions that were out there, and some things that were obvious that just seemed incredibly obvious to me that were not common practice in any way, shape, or form. And I was always raised with this idea and just grew up with the concept that, hey, if you're working a full-time job, you should be able to afford a place to live. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I recognized that just wasn't true. The more I dug into the problem, the more passionate I got about it, and the more people that I met who were struggling with these issues. Again, I think it just really fueled my passion for addressing the problem. And some people might think I was a little off my rocker for going about it the way that we have. But yeah, it's certainly something that we've committed ourselves to, and it's an important problem and probably the most important problem that I think I have any expertise in solving. And so just wanted to take a swing at it while we could.
Yeah. So you started Pad Split. Is it 7-8 years ago?
So I actually, it was an affordable housing ideas competition in late 2016 that I wrote the white paper for. And that little white paper became Pad Split. I officially founded it in 2017, although I didn't bring on any employees or co-founders until 2018. So we kind of say 2018 is like our official start date, because that's when we actually started getting other hosts that would list their properties. But yeah, I was there in 2017.
And how would you explain Pad Split to someone? So when you talk about the problems in American life and affordability, I'd say housing might be number one at this point. There are three staples. It's housing, education, and healthcare that have just gone up and up in cost, and Americans' incomes have often not gone up and up and up. And so one of the examples you cite right now is, hey, people might have to travel 2 hours to come in and serve your food, take care of your kids, cut your hair, and then where the heck are they living if they're trying to get to an urban environment where the cost of living is shot up? So I live in New York City, and that's certainly one of those zones. I mean, rents here are outlandish. You're in Atlanta, which I found to be, in the scheme of things, quite affordable. I guess that's what happens. New York conditions
it's all relative, right?
Where everything else. Yeah, it's all relative. So how does Pad Split help solve this problem for people?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the easiest way to think about it is we take the latent existing supply that's already out there. It's trapped typically in single family homes, but sometimes apartments, and we create access to that supply for the people who need it. We do that through a marketplace model. And for people who are not familiar with marketplaces, think like Airbnb or Uber. We don't own the properties. We incentivize owners of those properties to market those underutilized spaces for rent. And because we're renting a portion of a house instead of the whole house or a portion of apartment and just those individual bedrooms, usually with shared kitchens, sometimes with shared bathrooms, they're almost always cheaper than and to a significant degree than anything else that's currently available in the traditional market. And there is a ton of this space that's available. So we effectively sit between the renters who need the space and the owners who have it, and try to align incentives by making housing both more affordable and more profitable for those owners simultaneously, so that they'll actually go create more. And that's really how we try to address the problem.
So if someone's listening to this and they are a homeowner and they're thinking, wait a minute, my kids just moved out, I can rent a bedroom? Like what is like the minimum that I have to agree to rent out to become a pad split
Yeah, I
lending
mean,
like offerer?
it could be a one bedroom, and as crazy as that idea may sound today, it's not a new idea by any stretch. I mean, I think about, my mother, both of her grandmothers rented rooms in their homes that they lived in. Her godfather actually was a laborer who rented a room from her grandmother for 12 years. So this was something that was really common. I think 16% of all households in 1940 said that they took in boarders or roomers at some point in time. But we've really gone away from it, kind of post suburbanization, starting in the 1960s, truly. But the demand never went away, as you alluded. Uh, Wage growth has basically done this, and housing costs have done this. So I'm in my 40s, and that gap has just gotten wider and wider, and we see the desperate situation that we're in today. But by and large, like, there are two submarkets there. One is owner occupied, and it's always very difficult to convince an owner you should rent a room in your personal home to a stranger, right? Most people, whether because just cultural mindset has changed over the last 100 years, or we spend too much time watching the news, and there's just an overall lack of trust in society today, most people aren't super keen to that idea. Whereas it's pretty straightforward if you are a real estate investor, like, or if you're anyone, like, do you want to earn a higher return on investments? And the answer is almost always yes. So if you are a real estate owner, if you have a rental property, do you want to earn a higher return on that property? That's a pretty easy sales proposition. And that's where we focused most of our market. I think over time, hopefully, we can start to break down some of those barriers that prevent people from renting rooms in their personal homes to strangers. But by and large, today, most of our hosts are real estate investors, and we just need to show them how affordable housing can actually be more profitable for them. So then they go create it on their own.
Okay, so you write this white paper in 2017. You launched the company in 2018 to great fanfare. Was it like, oh my God, this is the greatest idea of all time? And like people were throwing things at
No,
you,
I
or
mean,
you were like
it's
trying to talk you into it?
as yeah, I mean, as you might imagine, and for anyone who's familiar with affordable housing, and I knew when I wrote the white paper, this would be pretty controversial. The Within the, we'll call it the capital A affordable housing space, there is just a general discomfort with the idea of profit driven incentives. Uh, and there's a maybe even more concern around this idea of rooming houses, which have just had negative connotations for a long time, as being disreputable. And I mean, even going back to the 20s in New York City for around tenement homes and those types of things. And so I knew it would be pretty controversial. But I describe myself as a professional bear poker to some degree, and have been for a large part of my
You
career.
know, I mean, I want to stop there for just a sec, Atticus, because when I saw Pad Split, and it could be, check it out. My parents immigrated to this country. I'm Asian, And so, the prospect of people moving into rooms and like living with folks, like I know
Yep.
that's happening right now in a bajillion different immigrant communities.
Sure.
You know what I
Sure.
mean? That like people, because you come in, you're freaking scrappy, just like trying to find a place that you
Yep.
can afford that might allow you to save a buck or two to maybe send to a family someplace else, or maybe save up so you can actually get ahead. And so that these things are happening, and I just want to express my enthusiasm for the idea from the get go, because I heard it and was like, oh yeah, sure, it makes a world of
Sure.
sense. In part because it's happening right now, but it was somewhat controversial when you embarked on this journey.
Yeah, no question. And I think, look, there's a big difference of perspective, I think, from people with recent immigrant heritage as well. And just different cultures have different mindsets around this. Clearly, there are a lot of intergenerational families within a lot of cultures across the United States, but not necessarily in kind of traditional white American culture that's been here for 100 years or so, where they think, oh well, the only way to live is in a suburban house with a white picket fence and a yard, and your parents live somewhere else, right? But so intergenerational families generally, I think, where those are more accepted, the idea is more easily taken. But yeah, I mean, for people just with the idea of rooming houses, I knew that would be a little bit controversial within the powers that be in affordable housing. And so the question for me very early on was, how do you create standards and just start to build trust? And that was, all right, every room on the platform has to meet basic underlying HUD standards. Like, I took housing choice program, so they have inspection standards for those individual houses. And I said, okay, well, every house that is on the platform has to meet these underlying HUD standards. And so that was one way to address it. But I also knew, because I had kind of run into this rooming house phenomenon in 2009 and had been experimenting with renting individual rooms versus renting houses versus renting apartments over a 7-year period. And it was just incredibly clear to me that this was a way more effective solution. It was way faster, way more cost effective, and could reach a much lower level of income necessary required for those individual housing units than anything else that was out there. And so it was just the most practical solution, regardless of whether or not it might be controversial in some circles. And I still feel that way today.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe, and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Probably on Mondays, but hit that bell, and thank you.
It's kind of a no-brainer when you look at, I mean, our average cost to access a room right now is $265. You
What?
compare that, yeah, across almost 12,000 rooms now. You compare that to the cheapest apartment in Metro Atlanta right now, which costs you almost $2,800
What?
between
I mean,
first
that's
month,
normal, yeah.
yeah, first and last month's rent, deposit, furnishing the unit, paying the utilities, paying the utility deposits, and all the junk fees that come along with that. And like, that part's pretty obvious. But there are a lot of other things that seem obvious when you really dive down into first principles of housing that are not at all industry norms. And we're just constantly fighting an uphill battle from 2017 to today on uh, why don't we do the things that make sense when you think about customer discovery or how people like to pay their bills. Uh, One of the examples that I also provide is the entire real estate industry assumes that you should pay rent on the first of the month. Well, as I sit here today, I couldn't tell you what day of the week May 1st falls on. And I would venture a guess that most of your audience couldn't say what May 1st falls on either. Or if they did, it happened to be their birthday, maybe you go to June 1st. But the entire ecosystem is built around this arbitrary day. And then they say, oh, well, and you're responsible for your own utilities, and your Your Wi-Fi might be due on the 13th, and your water bill might be due on the 17th, and your power bill might be due some other day. And then you might have to take out a loan for furnishing your unit because we don't want to do any of that. And lo and behold, you already know that all these people are living paycheck to paycheck, and you're saying, well, why don't you budget these 7 different bills and prioritize this arbitrary one that nobody on the call knows what day it is, versus if I say you have one bill that includes everything that's always due on Friday, that's much easier to remember. And even better if I can say you have one bill and it's due on your payday. Whatever day you happen to get paid by your job, you can customize your pay cycle around when that happens. It's way easier, right? But it's not at all intuitive for most of the industry, and it's also been a key reason why we can underwrite someone earning as little as $12,000 a year to rent a room and still derive a very high rate of collections. Like, it's not that they don't want to pay for their housing. Of course they do. It's that when you make it difficult, they have a hard time paying. And when you make it easy, it's much easier for them as well, and much more successful.
Yeah, apparently the median income of a renter on Pad Split is something like $28,000, which gives you a sense of the sort of people that you're able to provide housing to. I mean, if the cheapest room is $265, I mean, there are people here right now like freaking out about listening
Yeah.
to this, being like, "What? Like that's a thing?" But it does make sense that that would be a thing in an environment where they might be 5 or 6 boarders in a particular house, and this is part of it too. I mean, I'll let people get inside my head as well. Is that maybe it is the child of immigrants thing. But there was a long period of time when I'd go into places and I'd be like, I could sleep in this closet, like a place with like a big closet.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I've been here in Manhattan, so like I've always had this instinct that's like, yeah, you could like do a lot of adaptation with various spaces.
Yeah.
Now, but I'm thinking too. So part of it is that like I've always been very instinctively comfortable with, of course, multi-generational, also sort of communal living. So you guys, in terms of newish companies, circa 2018, attracted some very big name investors. I think Mark Cuban's an investor. You've raised tens of millions of dollars. You now have over 10,000 units. I think over 20,000 people living in these rooms that you've enabled. You've proven out the model in many respects, where you've shown it's like, look, we can actually make these economics very, very functional. Now, one of the things that I think you said earlier, I want to press on a little bit, is that right now, obviously, most everyone knows we have a massive shortage. We know that a lot of housing units aren't being built right now because there are these onerous regulations. Everyone knows about NIMBYism, which is like everyone's for affordable housing in the abstract, but if you say, hey, we're going to build it down the street from you, it's like, can't have that because
Sure.
that would
Sure.
screw up my property values. and, and by the way, I'm going to say something else that might be controversial. Like, it's a relatively recent phenomenon in American life that we see houses as piggy banks.
Yeah.
Like the notion that's like, I'm going to get this thing and it's going to like go up in value and it must go up in value. I mean, in a better functioning world, we'd actually build enough housing where it wouldn't be this squeeze, wouldn't be up and up. You wouldn't have to, because if you're a young family right now, it's very, very hard to buy a house, particularly if you have mortgage rates the place they are. But when you come and say, hey guys, look, here's a practical solution right now, there's some resistance because it's like, no. There's like this ideal world that if we could do, then there'd be, these other things. And you say, well, shoot. What about the here and now? What about all the people that are trying to get to
Yeah.
work or like find a place? And then you probably get some pushback from the folks who, like idealize
Yes. Yes.
what's going on out there. And you talked about the uphill climb. Like, what are the obstacles for you in terms of having Pad Split everywhere? I think you guys are in 15 states right now. Like, is it capital? Is it regulatory? Like what are the barriers?
Yes. So, I mean, to pull up a second, like, we run into pushback, I'd say, from two sets of groups. Uh, the ideologues are one of them, and those are sometimes harder for me to wrap my head around because we should be pushing in the same direction, but it's like the general feeling like perfect can be the enemy of good, and because it's not nonprofit, or it's not government, or everyone doesn't have their own apartment with granite countertops and 700 square feet. That therefore it is less than, and it is not enough to be what affordable housing should be, and what everyone deserves. Um, and so that's one group. The other group is maybe more obvious, which is NIMBYs. Folks who say, well, not in my backyard. Yes, affordable housing might be important, but I don't want it here. And uh, to those, I mean, there are two fundamental arguments. One, ethical, which is, do you think the people who serve your community deserve an opportunity to live there? Right? Do the teachers, firefighters, service workers, the security guards, like who are ultimately part of the ecosystem that serves you, do they at least deserve? I wouldn't even say a right, but do they deserve an opportunity to live in your community? And most people will not answer that question negatively, at least in public. They might do it behind closed doors, and we know they think it, but from a political argument, it's very difficult to justify that point of view. And then for the ideologues, it's simply a question of practicality. And we look at, yeah, I mean, shelter is at the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And how can we create more opportunities as quickly and cost effectively as possible? Because the reality is we don't have the money. Like, we don't have the money nor the time to solve this issue in the traditional way that we have tried to address it over my lifetime. And so everyone likes to use the buzzword innovation, but few people are willing to understand that that comes with trade-offs. And again, for me, it's such an obvious solution because there are two major problems in as you think about housing affordability generally. You've got one, which is a supply problem, and it's simply supply and demand, and two, which is access, which few people talk about, and it's related to supply, but not but still separate from supply. On the supply side, if you look at the average space per person in the United States over the last 70 years, in 1950, based on census data, we used 298 square feet per person. Well, and that jives with most people. I mean, if you watch an old black and white TV show, or you just have had parents who lived in 900 square foot houses with their 3 or 4 siblings, like that fits. Well, today that number is 867 square feet per person, and yet we have this massive supply shortage. So it's not that we have a supply problem; we have a distribution problem, and it's trapped inside empty bedrooms. I mean, you have millions of empty bedrooms around the country. It's trapped in just wasted space that's already been built, to the point where you could solve the entire shortage. So National Low Income Housing Coalition estimates that there's a shortage of 7.3 million deeply affordable homes. Well, if you simply were efficient as you were in 1950, 298 square feet per person, you've solved that entire gap with less than 1% of existing housing stock today without building a single thing. So like that's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. And for me, what I say is obvious is, why don't you just put people in the bedrooms? And if you had a way to put people in the bedrooms, then like, you wouldn't have to spend so much money, $1 million or so per unit in a place like California, to create new units. The question is one, technology, two, trust, and three, incentive. And if you can address those issues, like, that's a much cheaper, much faster solve than anything else that's out there, regardless of whether you do it with investors or homeowners or however you get it done. But like, the space exists.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Going online without ExpressVPN is like changing while leaving your window wide open. You might not have anything to hide, but why give randos a chance to invade your privacy? When you go online without a VPN, ISPs can see every single website you visit, and they can legally sell this information without your consent to ad companies and big tech who can then use your data to target you and profit, not to your benefit, generally at your expense. So using ExpressVPN, it's like being a member of a high-tech company that's on your side, where they beam you into a server in another part of the world. No one can see anything you do. Just fire up the app, click one button, and you're beamed onto a completely safe, anonymized internet. They can't do anything with your data. I use ExpressVPN to have that peace of mind. To secure your online activity by visiting expressvpn.com/yang today. That's expressvpn.com/yang. And you can get an extra 3 months for free. expressvpn.com/yang. Put people in the rooms.
I know, it's crazy.
All right, so I'm going to say a couple of minor controversial things, but I'm not sure the single family home is an ideal way to raise kids or have humans develop. I think in the state of nature, you're hanging out in larger numbers. You have different people of different generations continuously interacting, and then there's kind of this and by the way, simultaneously now we have something of a mental health crisis, a relationship crisis, a dearth of friendship crisis, a loneliness crisis, and I do think cordoning us off in these ways and saying, "Hey, like you guys go there," and then I mean, I'm not even sure people talk to their neighbors in the way that they used to. I'm sure they don't. There's a trust thing too that you mentioned, where in the old timey movies, like someone shows up in a town and then goes into a house and like gets a room for like probably
Sure.
like whatever it was, like $120 that month, and like lives there and is and the rest of it. When I was growing up in the 70s, hitchhiking was a thing. You would just
Yeah.
go and be like, "Hey, here it is," and then someone might pick you up, and then you talk to a stranger. One of the things that saddens me is that I'm a parent and my kids get taught about stranger danger all the time. Like I watch some of the cartoons have some of those lessons embedded. It's like, oh, like they talk to you. That's freaking, they're up to no good. And part of me is like, is that what we should be teaching our kids? I mean, I know there is like the occasional creep or, person of bad intention, but, I don't think most people are that way. And so there's been like a massive evolution of the way that we imagine our habitats and environments, that I don't know is really adding value
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
for us.
well, and it's funny. Like, I mean, in American culture, I think we've all just accepted that you're supposed to have your own place, and that uh, really since the 1960s, uh, you you have your own abode, and it is separate from everyone else, and there are fences between you. But this is really a modern suburban experiment that's just been within the last 80 or so years, uh, and and yeah, I think it's reasonable to look at cause and effect of, all right, well, what are the problems that we have today societally, whether it's because of lack of trust or mental health issues or loneliness issues, and as you laid out, correlation versus causation, and where do we not see these same problems, or what cultures around the world seem to be faring better or having fewer issues, and I think that's relevant to think about. I don't I don't get so deep into that aspect. I think you can certainly pull from different histories to maybe draw at least some casual conclusions, but and someone who's much smarter than me will probably do a much more detailed analysis on that. But yeah, I mean, for me, it is as basic, Andrew, as let's put people in bedrooms, and when you and I can't tell you how many times uh, we have run into folks who again are working full time, and you have no idea that this person's homeless, right? We think of homelessness, or at least a lot of people in this country, as, oh, well, there's like a panhandler on the street, or there's someone dealing with mental health or substance abuse issues. um, and it's what you see, but it's really the tip of the iceberg. And what I think most of America doesn't recognize is, uh, you walk by and interact with individuals every single day that are dealing with homelessness, that you have no idea. You have absolutely no idea, because they look just like any of us, and they act just like any of us, and they are just like any of us. But the system has conspired against them in a way that, look, wages are still here and housing costs are here. What are you going to do? And they're not looking for anyone's pity. They're just looking for a better opportunity. And I think, if we want to talk about what America can and should be, that's, fulfilling those opportunities is a big part of it. But people have been renting rooms for centuries. Abraham Lincoln was one of them.
Yeah, I think the New York Times called pad split the new old solution to
Yeah.
the affordable housing problem. Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast, you just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. So let's say someone's listening to this and is like, that sounds perfectly sensible. You know what? One reason why I think I like it is that it just seems like it's easing an inefficiency. That there are these idle rooms that could be difference makers, and you're activating them, and then you're getting some money and value out of that. So like
Yeah.
that seems like a win. It's going to be a massive upgrade for the situations a lot of these people are currently facing. So that's like a massive societal win. Win for human dignity in my mind. And then the people that think like, oh, it's not dignified unless you have your own like kitchenette and 700 square feet or whatever that, it's like, I mean, on that one, I'm kind of happy to let them decide like what's the
Sure.
most dignified situation
Yeah,
for
well,
them.
I mean, imagine that we actually like trust people with their own choices and agency. But yeah, it's a great point. And I think one of the things that I've always thought about as most valuable for the platform and a marketplace like this is, uh, our residents can choose from thousands of options, and there's no long term commitment. And if they want to transfer from one unit to another, whether because of a change in job, or because they don't like their current host, or because they want to go pursue a new opportunity in a new city, uh, that's super easy in a way where just 10-15 years ago, the only way that an individual in need of this type of housing would be able to find it was something on Craigslist that may or may not be a scam, or a sign in front of someone's yard. But just the power of choice, I think, is probably the biggest opportunity that we can create.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of a few things. If someone likes this vision, I like this vision, and wants to be part of what Pad Split is enabling. So number one is, hey, if you have some spare bedroom or space, like you can consider being a host on it. Maybe you're someone who actually needs a place to crash, and it's like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing, and so let me see if there is something available. The very high end, maybe you're even an investor type who's looking at owning properties and was considering turning them into an Airbnb. Maybe this is a better way to go. That's more pro-social, more lucrative. So those are things that would be top of mind. But is there something that people can do around zoning regs or politically? Like if
Yeah.
someone wants to be helpful to pad split, aside from participating in the marketplace in some way, is there something else to be done?
Absolutely, absolutely, and thanks for bringing that up. So most people are not aware that in this country, the word family is defined on a local level, and so I'm in the Atlanta metro area. There are 83 different jurisdictions with 83 different definitions of family. Uh, that's wild, right? And family means how many unrelated people are allowed to live together. So the Golden Girls, which is one of my favorite examples, would be prohibited legally from living together in most cities in America. And you can go into
Because there were
one
four
city.
unrelated people.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, because a lot of cities say no more than two unrelated people. You can have an unlimited number of related people. Many of them make exceptions for domestic servants. You can have an unlimited number of domestic servants who live with the family, but you can't have more than two unrelated people or three unrelated people. There's one jurisdiction in Metro Atlanta that even excludes grandparents from the definition. Aunts, uncles are excluded.
That's whack.
So yeah, so intergenerational families all of a sudden don't count as families anymore. There's Chesterfield County, Virginia, which is where Richmond is located. No more than two unrelated people, but as many domestic servants as you want. Um, and and so like just keep in mind that these laws exist. Uh, I think what happens is even when you have forward-thinking local officials who know that these laws are on the books and would like to change them, they don't usually have the political capital, or they don't know if they have the political capital to go in and change them, because the people who are shouting "not in my backyard" are often the most vocal constituents in those communities, and so it creates a real reticence on behalf of local policymakers to go address those. Sometimes they can be, and we've seen some successes on local levels around the country to try to address these definitions of family and make them more inclusive. HUD has a definition, by the way, that's very inclusive. If you just matched the HUD definition across the country, I think that would open up a tremendous amount of housing, and again, would be a very cost-effective way to do it, whether it was Pad Split or anyone else who wanted to create this type of option. Um, but also Colorado on a statewide basis has just the House has just passed a rule prohibiting local jurisdictions from using anything other than safety regulations. They can't use familial status as a basis for excluding different people from living together, which I think makes sense, right? I mean, you can say, hey, we have fire safety protection measures that we want to take care of, or we have basic occupancy standards for health that we want to address. But you shouldn't be able to say in 2024 whether or not someone is a blood relative of yours makes really any difference as to whether or not they are allowed to live with you. But that is the law of the land in 95+% of jurisdictions in the United States today.
Wow. Well, there should be a movement to change that, Atticus, and I'm come up with a corny name for it right now. Get ready. The We Are Family movement.
Love it. Yeah, we're all related, right?
We're all
Uh,
related somehow. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that movement take place. It just seems so straightforward. It's like, look, guys, let's define family in a broad, inclusive way, and then let people live with who they want to live with.
yeah.
That doesn't seem super controversial.
Well, I mean, and I mean, it goes back to the First Amendment, Andrew. I mean, freedom of association is theoretically protected under the First Amendment. Well, I mean, Thurgood Marshall, Supreme Court Justice, when there was a case about some of these family laws in 1973, 74, there was a case called Belterre, and he was the lone dissent. And that's exactly what he brings up, which was, look, guys, there's freedom of association under the First Amendment. Anyone can choose to live with whoever they want to live with. Like, this is not and should not be a controversial idea. Uh, and it goes back since the founding of the country. But yet here we are still fighting these battles today.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I have always been a mattress guy. I thought if you're going to spend 8 hours doing something, you should pay attention to what you're doing it on. That's why I love the Helix Sleep product. It is made for me. I am someone who sleeps on my back. I do not sleep hot. I like a firm mattress. And so when I took the Helix Sleep quiz, I wound up with a Helix Dawn model. And it's been fantastic, not just for me, but for my kids who seek it out of the entire house. Don't want to take my word for it? Helix has been awarded the #1 mattress pick by GQ and Wired magazine, and they have a 100-night free trial and 10 to 15 year warranty is baked in. That's confidence in your product, and if you get on a Helix Sleep mattress, you will see why they are so confident. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang and use code HelixPartner20. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. Well, this really is an awesome epiphany for me and for many others, which is you think about the affordable housing crisis in this country. You think about, oh, like we can't get stuff done. Most people would have no idea that a lot of it might boil down to what the definition of family is in towns across the country and who's allowed to live with each other. And then
Sure.
what that means in terms of various housing arrangements. So if we can help change that, that would be awesome. You can imagine a much more vibrant, dynamic, free, and efficient environment. And I dare say we might end up being around people that aren't, aren't exactly like ourselves and like the same environments over and
Yeah.
over again. And like there might be a bit more shared humanity and perspective. I mean, I'll close on like on something that I'm dealing with every day, which is so I grew up the child of immigrants, and so like had a particular set of experiences and vibe. And I see my 2 boys, and I'm continuously trying to share with them. It's like, hey, this is what your grandparents went through, or here's some of the stuff I saw. And then, I can sense that they're just like, frankly, like blissfully ignorant about so much of it. It's like, oh, it's just like dad talking about this this stuff. And it's, you hope that your children will have a sense that that security guard or service worker or a person working the flower shop or whatever, it's like, look, they have homes to go home to, hopefully, and like families and everything else. And like, it's like, everyone deserves dignity and the ability to live not 2 hours away from where they're working. And that my kids don't just interact with other people in the same circumstances that they are, because I certainly felt exposed to all sorts of people when I was growing up. And it is, it's funny because, and I tell myself too, it's like, look, man, I mean, your kids can't grow up the same way you did, and times change and everything else. but hopefully we can introduce a little bit more shared experience into everyone's life.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think, one of the things that I've come to recognize is, I mean, I rented a room when I first moved to Atlanta 20 plus years ago, but almost everyone will rent a room at some point in their lives, whether it's in college, or if you're much older and you're in a nursing home or elder care facility. But some people will need to rent a room for the rest of their lives, and just recognizing those economic realities of where we are, and to your point, I mean, just making sure that people can live with dignity and can have the agency of their own choices. But some baseline level of opportunity, and we want to make sure that we can create as many of those as we can.
Yeah, man. My first job was as a busboy at a Chinese restaurant in my town in New York, and the reason I was a busboy is that my written Chinese was too weak to translate orders to the kitchen staff who did not speak any English. But the restaurant workers all rode in on a bus together, and then they would, get on the bus back to New York, and I have a feeling that they were probably living in like
Yeah,
shared housing situations
yeah.
like this. And Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from them. I was, in some ways, I was not very good at that job because all of their hands were somehow insensitive to heat. So when plates and cups came out of warmers, I'd be like, ooh, ooh, ow, 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 and they'd just be like scoffing at like, like my
Just
softness as to things that get. So it's a positive vision that pad split is trying to make happen. I hope people embrace it, whether it's by going to local officials and saying, hey, I think people should be able to live with who they want, potentially being host or even a renter. If someone wants to follow you and your activities, Atticus, is there a place they can go?
So I'm most active on LinkedIn. I'm too wordy to condense everything down to 220 characters on Twitter or X, but yeah, I'm mostly active on LinkedIn and publish a newsletter there every 2 weeks. But otherwise, yeah, podcasts like this anytime.
Well, hopefully, Pad Split sweeps the nation and makes it more affordable to be an American. Thank you for the work you're doing, man, and I'll do what I can to help.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Andrew. Really appreciate it.